Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in to our book launch with today's author, Mark Richard and June Gaston. And I am really excited to be here today. My name is Jim Howard, publisher for Morgan James Publishing. And as I said, all the way from Guatemala, we have Mark Richard, who the author of All We Need is a Pair of Pliers, A Divine Appointment. And we also have the co-author of the book, June Gaston. So thank you guys and welcome, and thank you for taking the time to join us today.
Yeah, you're welcome.
So Mark, this is a really cool book, really cool story. But what inspired you to tell your story?
Well, one of the reasons, about 15 years ago, I went to California. I had led a design team of a children's wheelchair, and I brought it out to Johnny and Friends. And most of you know who Johnny Erickson Tade is, because she's written close to 50 books. She broke her neck in a diving accident when she was 17 years old, but her story has inspired millions around the world. I developed and directed her Wheels for the World program in the early days. And at this time, I brought a chair that I had helped design to show her. But when we went to the office, I was with my brother David, who's mentioned quite a bit of my story. And the first thing Johnny said, we hadn't even got up to her to shake her hand or to give her a hug. And she said, "When are you guys going to write a book?" And of course, she knows my story and has told it many times, different aspects. And then it was just a few years later, I was on a mission trip, and other members of my church, Living Springs Church from Brandon, South Dakota, was on that trip. It was a joint project with Samaritan's Purse, and we were giving away, I don't know, about 200 wheelchairs over this week. And during that trip, I was, we had a rented bus because the team was pretty big, and we were coming back from San Miguel to Quito, and I was telling my story and just different divine stories and God's leading and guiding and protection of my life. And I guess June was impressed, and she made it very, very clear that if I ever wanted to write a book, tell my story, that she would help me after she retired from a public school. She was a public school principal at that time. So, and then another inspiration is my friend Carl DeRocher. He's a very close family friend. He had polio at 8 years old and was left without the use of his arms or legs. And he was like a brother to me and my 5 brothers. And he helped me get the first wheelchairs that I brought to Guatemala back in 1988.
Oh, outstanding, outstanding. Well, you had a very interesting life and childhood and youth. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, let me start with my parents got divorced when I was 14 years old. I had 2 older brothers and 3 younger brothers. So my mother was trying to take care of all 6 of us. And we took advantage of the situation. Of course, I was pretty rebellious at the time, but I ended up running away from home. I was still just 15 years old, went to Chicago. Actually, I ran away twice. Both times got locked up as a runaway in Chicago, and they sent me back. My mother had to come and get me. And I just ended up going headlong into the hippie and the drug movement. And before I turned 17, I had hitchhiked. Of course, 1968 and 69 was different back then. A lot of people would hitchhike. But I traveled through 36 states. I mean, from Florida to New York, California, all the way up to Washington State. And but anyway, being part of the hippie movement, and then I got very deep into drugs. Alcohol, being in a German community. It was very, in Wisconsin, you could get served beer at 18 years old. I looked older than I was, so I could even get served when I was 15 years old. That led to marijuana, and before I was still 15 years old and I started using intravenous drugs. Ended up moving into Madison, which was the heat of the anti-war movement. But I know this is crazy, but probably the best thing that helped me to get me off the drugs is I ended up, because of intravenous drug use, I ended up getting hepatitis B, ended up in the University of Wisconsin hospital. I was only 17 years. And the hospital room that I was in was just prior to that was a young girl at 17 years old that died from hepatitis. So the hospital nurses and staff were pretty shook up. And my hepatitis was pretty severe, even though I didn't feel very sick. They were really concerned for my life. And so for 3 weeks, I got lectures. But during that time, I started to pray and I realized that, I just needed to change my friends. And I ended up getting involved in the Jesus movement. And that transition, I went from, the hippie movement into a very radical Jesus group. Fortunately, even though it was very controlling, the leader had been in the Marine Corps, had been a Pentecostal evangelist. So we had very high morals and strict values. So in that way, it was good, but there was other things that weren't so good about that. But in my life, it was one step out of that whole hippie lifestyle. But we hitchhiked around and we traveled, and it was a ministry that reached out to other kids that were using drugs. So I traveled all over the US, Canada, even Mexico and the Caribbean. But an interesting thing happened during those years. I would run into a lot of people that had come out of the Amish and the Mennonites. It was kind of a revival going on because the Amish had really strayed from their roots. They're from 400 years before and during the radical Reformation. And that Reformation was kind of a Jesus movement only 400 years before. So they were, I was kind of a novelty to them because I had been reading. Even though I dropped out of school, I still spent a lot of time in libraries and on university campuses and their libraries doing research, especially about church history. And, anyway, I ended up meeting some different Mennonites, and I was later invited to Central America, to Belize. And that's where I lived in an old order community made up of old order Amish and old order Russian Mennonites. And I slowly started working in southern Belize among the Mayans, the Quechua Mayans mainly, and then started going over doing volunteer work in Guatemala. And this was during the height of that armed conflict. And so I got to see and hear a lot of stories about the atrocities committed by both sides. But yeah, during that, my life with, living in Central America during their war, and it was pretty fascinating time.
Yeah, that's wow. I mean, what a journey. And yeah, you should write a book. Oh wait, you did. And it's a really good one too. I'll tell you, we've been just really honored to be a part of your story and your journey. But with everything you're doing, now you have a global wheelchair ministry, all of that. How do you still find time to help your wife in a coffee farm?
Well, I spent over 30 years. Since 1988 is when I started bringing wheelchairs to Guatemala. But then I helped develop a lot of different programs, helped a lot of other disability and wheelchair ministries get started on their advisory teams and committees and as a co-founder or director of these organizations. But I spent 30 years, and I don't know how many countries. I'm sure I've been to at least 30, 40 countries, many of those delivering wheelchairs. But the way I started was collecting used chairs. And then I started setting up wheelchair shops. I set up shops using retired volunteers, school students, that would volunteer on weekends or in the evenings. But most of our work was done in the prison system in South Dakota, at a couple medium and a maximum security prison. And we set up shops, but I would collect these wheelchairs with, of course, part of a big team from all over the US. And we got up to, I think our biggest year, we had collected and shipped over 8,000 wheelchairs.
Wow.
That year. But what our biggest problem was, if you would collect 100 wheelchairs and then refurbish them and get them ready and ship them overseas, then I would show up, for example, I'd go to Vietnam or Africa, and of those 100 chairs, maybe 40 or 50 of the people coming would be children. And I would only have a small percentage, maybe at best 15% children's chairs. I decided to develop a chair. I made up my mind I was going to design a children's chair that didn't have any wells, kind of a modular. And I did the first chair, but it was limited for moderately disabled children. But I eventually saw the need because collecting all the used wheelchairs in the US and Canada and shipping them overseas is still just a drop in the bucket.
Yeah.
There are 70 million people that need wheelchairs worldwide, according to the World Health Organization. So I decided I was going to design a chair that would be modular, that could meet the needs of from small children to adults. So that's where I developed the Beeline. And so we're putting children that are 1.5 years old up to adults, children with very complex and people with complex needs, but also active wheelchairs. Right now we have a factory. We're doing everything under one roof, and our goal is to duplicate this so that we can help people manufacture durable wheelchair designed for the third world for all different disabilities and to meet those needs. So that's a big challenge. But we have a coffee farm. In fact, in about an hour here, we're going to drive. It's about 5-6 hours from here. But we spend about every other weekend on the coffee farm. But with depressed coffee prices, we have a commitment to quality, select coffee. It's in a lot of ways, it's a hobby farm because there's, if you're really going to have good coffee, it's hard to be paid what it's really worth. So we treat our workers good. The nice thing about the coffee farm is I'm able to continue my relief work. We've given away lots of wheelchairs. As it turns out, my wife's cousin is a rehab doctor and manages a rehab facility no more than 10 or 15 miles from the farm. And we've been able to do a lot of other outreach, bringing food to people that are hungry. There's a high rate of malnutrition in this part of Guatemala, well, all over Guatemala. But we've also, because of the 2 recent hurricanes, we've done a lot of relief, bringing aid, food and cleaning supplies and shelters, material to temporary shelters to that area. But yeah, it's really rest and relaxation because my wife's life is very similar to mine. She's traveled the world with the coffee industry, so our lives are very parallel. So anyway, I do find time, and I hope you enjoy reading my book, and I really thank June for all her help.
Well, I know people will enjoy the book, and even more than that, just seeing the work that goes on behind helping so many people in need. And you're an inspiration for what you've done and taking charge of something that needed to exist that didn't, and pulling the resources together and building something that can help others. So I hope that everyone watching this will get a copy of All We Need Is a Pair of Pliers, read the stories attached to it, but get a really good understanding of what's going on in the world, and what Mark's building and doing with the wheelchair community, with Beeline wheelchairs. And Mark, if people want to connect with you, find out more about the book, or find out more about your ministry, what's the best place for them to go? How can they get more information?
Just beelinewheelchairs.org would be the best way to get a hold of us. And it's in partnership with Mission Impact. And yeah, before we go, I just want to say that everything that I've done, it's just been one divine appointment after another, and God leading, and just bringing the right people in my life, whether God was bringing me out of drugs and the hippie culture, or helping me to provide mobility to people around the world. It's just one miracle and divine appointment after another. So I want to thank the Lord.
Oh, amen. Amen. Well, thank you, Mark, for taking the time to share with us. And June, thank you for being here as well. And I know you were a big instrumental part in helping Mark pull that story together. And the book could not exist without you. And we are so honored to have you guys as part of the Morgan James family.
We're very grateful that you guys decided to publish this book, because it's a story that needs to be told. So thank you.
Absolutely. And you guys watching out there, you can find a copy of Mark's book anywhere books are sold. It's available online. It's available in your retailers. Make sure you grab a copy of All We Need Is a Pair of Pliers, a divine appointment. Read it. More importantly, get connected. Figure out, see what Mark's doing. Let it be an inspiration for you to do more, either supporting his ministry or through your own. But the bottom line is there's a lot of work out there that needs to be done. And Mark is feet on the ground, boots in action. And we're so honored to support this incredible book. We hope you do as well. So thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll see you on our next